a group of cats is called a clouder. I don't think that's true. For today's video, we're going to be testing the new Cat Coder Pro V2 from QuaiPilot. Now, this is a model that was suggested to me in my previous video. A few folks had mentioned this in the comments that I should test it, and I figured I'd look at it just to see what's up. Now, I ran one totally random benchmark with this through OpenRouter, not even on this computer. It was a random, like, make me a 3D flight simulator game, nothing with combat or anything like that. And I've actually transferred the result over to this computer because the result was quite shocking, to be completely transparent. Now, you'll look at this at first and be like, hey, this looks like garbage. But the actual uniqueness of this is very different. This is a totally different style aesthetically of result that I've ever seen when doing a flight simulator prompt like this. And to that point, there's actually a bunch of other specific options here. You can change the view. So we see it did actually implement a kind of airplane model, albeit rather weird, different camera views and things of the sort. Now, also additionally to that, check this out. There's a landing gear toggle. And don't worry, we're going to get into a more traditional introduction as well. But this just had so many unique attributes to it that I've not really seen in any of my other model tests. Also, the terrain here is very properly retro look. I don't know how to describe that, but this looks like a proper retro terrain. So this really just got me rather excited to test this model. And I've not done anything aside from this, but I wanted to jump in and show this specifically because this is what's have me very excited right now to film this. So with that, let's take a little peek at this model and the limited bit of information that seemingly exists pertaining to it, and then we'll jump into some fun and light testing. To begin with a bit of pertinent information about this model, just in terms of specifics, we can see that this has a 256K context length and a max token output length of 80K. I do believe, yes, okay, so we did see that right here. I was not hallucinating. Although it seems if you use this specific provider, the max output is jumped up to 144K. So I'm not 100% sure what to make of that. But really, the main thing is here, this is designed to be a powerful agentic coding model, and I really cannot find much information about this, meaning there's no real specific announcement, blog, release post, or anything. The only thing I was really able to find is just kind of a thread of X posts pertaining to this model, where it is their most capable coding agent model yet. We do also see some benchmark JPEGs in this thread here as well, and a lot of these are just kind of compared to other models like GLM 5, Minimax M2.7, Opus 4.6, GPT 5.4, and Gemini 3.1 Pro. So pretty much aside from Kimi there, I think mostly all of the big players, and of course DeepSeek, so I'm probably forgetting some, but there's only so many you can fit on a chart like this. Additionally to that, there's also some other benchmarks right here, which I'm not going to pay too much mind on, but it does seem like this will hypothetically stack up very favorably compared to other models, mainly Claude Opus 4.6, which we can see is a prominent competitor as based on this benchmark chart. And really, there's just a few more specific benchmarks listed here, but this is pretty much it for the announcement post that I could actually locate for this model. So I went ahead and enlisted the help of our friend Claude, and I said, can you just tell me a little more about the company this model comes from? And it says the reason you're having trouble finding a formal announcement or company page is that this isn't from some mysterious startup. It's from Kaishu. I would imagine Kuaishou, I don't know, one of China's largest short video and live streaming platforms. Think of it as a major competitor to TikTok or ByteDance in China. So QuaiPilot is Kaishu's AI research division specializing in AI for software engineering. CAT stands for Quai AutoThink, and the models are a family of coding-focused LLMs. So this was just a bit of additional pertinent information that I wanted to gather about this model, as it was pretty light and there was no traditional announcement post. Now, something interesting here as well on X is that you can't actually follow me, so my profile's right here, and you can see the username is there. Also, subscribe to the channel if you like. Now, with that, I don't know why I said it that way. Let's jump in and test this. We're going to be doing some tests through OpenRouter, and we're also going to be doing some tests just using OpenCode so we can see it perform in an agentic harness as well. We are going to begin, why is there an additional dash there? With the Browser OS test version 2, where it needs to create a Browser OS that contains at least 5 applications, 2 of which must be games, the ability to change the wallpaper, and then a special feature that it decides on and implements on its own. We can see here the speed is quite good, so I'm happy to see this. After my GLM 5.1 video where the speed was frustrating to say the least, this is a nice break. All right, let's take a look at our Cat Coder Pro V2 Browser OS. WebOS booting system. Okay, I would like to see that once more. It definitely has a somewhat neon aesthetic to it. Overall, off the bat here, I suppose I need more time to assess. Is there a right click? There's no right click, but again, it's not denoted specifically in the prompt. There is a clock in the bottom right with the correct time in my locale, and we do have our apps with the icons properly arranged here. Let's check out our start menu. That's weak. I'm mad about that, but you know what? We'll move past it. Terminal. Okay, type help for available commands. Let's just try the matrix command. Follow the white rabbit. Interesting. I've had a lot of these specific matrix references lately. Can we minimize to the taskbar? Yes. Can we reopen from the taskbar? Yes. Can we full screen? Okay, simple notepad. Nothing special really implemented here. Overall, first impressions, I'm not as impressed with this as I was hoping to be when seeing that flight simulator result, which was really cool. 85 times 3. Calculator works. Tic-tac-toe. All right, let's see if this implemented the AI opponent logic or just a normal. Okay, so this just implemented some normal logic. Sometimes they'll implement like the AI you play against. Player X wins, good. And I do like the little celebration emoji there as well. Next up, good. It did not immediately begin the game until we initiate it. I don't normally see this version. I normally see the one where if you go out of bounds, it breaks, but regardless. Okay, good. So there was some logic filled in there. Then finally, settings. Oh, good. So we can hopefully change wallpaper in here. Significantly better than the one it loaded in with. And we just have a nice different like rainbow array of gradients. Okay, some of the Easter eggs here. Oh, okay. So this simulates a Hollywood style hacking scene. Okay, this is actually good. That I like. It's a bit clever, and that is a nice little Easter egg. I do believe we had a couple other ones. So Matrix we did do, joke, and then cat. Cat shows random cat facts, which is interesting because cat is actually a legitimate terminal command. Not for that, though. Cats sleep 70% of their lives. So do I. Why did the developer go broke? Because he used up all his cash. Oh, no. I don't think I've heard that before. And I was happier when I hadn't. With that, I think this could do with a little constructive criticism. We'll just see what it says. I didn't really give it any specific piece of criticism. I appreciate the honest feedback. Let me create a significantly improved version with better functionality, cleaner code, and more polished feature. Okay. Well, the second iteration of this was 800 lines longer, so the first one was around 1200. This one's over 2000. Okay, we have a much cleaner initialization screen first and foremost, and definitely it starts with a nicer background gradient to see. Do we have a right click? Okay, no, we don't, but I didn't tell it to specifically, and we still have the clock in the bottom right. I think the first thing I'm going to be searching for is whether or not the start menu is actually implemented. Very good, and it did. And I would imagine everything is pretty much the same. I do like that it actually changed it to version 2 as opposed to version 1. So that's some nice attention to detail, I will say, and everything overall seems to look much more matured in a good way. So it does properly look like a second iteration of this. A group of cats is called a clouder. I don't think that's true. Our notepad looks better, and there's a bunch of additional options here that were not there previously. So word count, good. 1 word, 20 characters. Clear does work, and then let's see if we save. Does it save it as a text file, or will it just save it in the browser? Okay, no, it's saved in real OS. This would save to disk. Acceptable. Okay, and it still has the same logic, so that's just what I wanted to check there. Then finally, our settings, which is just a bit cleaner, and we do have the different background gradient options as well. Overall, this was a nice improvement to the original test. Next up, I'm going to be testing the beautiful static subway scene test. Now, someone in the comments had suggested that because these often appear so dark, I should also amend this prompt to say there should be a slider to control how light or dark the scene is. So I have just also added that in here as well, as that is a good idea and kind of an additional test to see if they are able to pull that off or not. So it still has not worked with the subway sim. This is the third try and the final result that I'm going to give it, and I'm very happy to report that it does in fact work. All right, let me see if the lighting control does work as well. It does, but maybe not to the extent that we would think it would. So we can see it is definitely having an effect on the scene. It's just not necessarily internal to the scene that the effect is taking place. However, it does have floating particles here. We do have some interesting lights and some interesting ceiling, whether it be shadows being drawn from the lights or design, we do have that. Now, I do also see some form of texture and almost what looks like an HVAC grate there. I don't think that is, but on these pillars that would be holding the roof up. We do also have some other elements on the wall, but really the saturation here is just far too much to be able to make out perhaps more detail that could exist in this scene, but it did successfully do it, and I'm happy to report that. And we can see that the lighting just kind of, oh, all right, well, we have some floor textures, and we also have some checkerboard floor patterns here as well. Actually, I will say the reflection on the tile here from the lights is not bad. Keep in mind, this did take 3 tries to get it working, so I'm not glazing the result. I just did like that one specific thing. Yeah, interesting material on the columns here. This is an interesting result, but I'm happy it did end up working, though it did take 3 tries. Third try is the charm. Cool. And this was a very good implementation, so whoever had specifically suggested that in the comments, thank you. That was very good. So I'm now going to begin just a simple test of this in OpenCode where I have created a skate directory, and I'm going to see first and foremost if it will actually find its way into said skate directory. Okay, got it. I'll create. That was interesting. So I didn't do anything. All I said to it was go to skate directory, and it went in there and it actually found and read the instruct.txt by itself, which is to create a C++ skateboarding game in a single file. I was going to swap it into plan mode once it found its way into the directory and then tell it to read that, create a plan for it, and then have it build it. But because it took it upon itself to just fully go in there and see the instruction file and then begin to do stuff, I guess I'm just going to go hands off and we'll see what this comes up with. That was interesting. All right, we can see that it's now performing some test compilations, and it did receive some errors there, and now it did work and did open. Very interesting. That result has a very similar aesthetic style to, I think it was GPT 5.4 Mini, and it was a good aesthetic style, so it's giving us build instructions right here. However, it had already built it to test it, and this happened fairly quickly, so the executable should just be contained in our skate directory. Let's go ahead now and take a peek. All right, first and foremost, I do like the aesthetic style. We do have our controls and a score method as well as some statistics. So we even have a speedometer for the skateboard. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Hey, all right, there are some separately moving arms, even I would call those maybe flailing, but let's see. Okay, so D is a flip trick in air. So this is actually really not bad. The thing I'm noticing is there are no trick animations, and I would like for that to not be the case. I would like there to be trick animations. So I think being that we did make this in OpenCode, interesting, we also get an FPS counter in the top right. There are some adjustments that I can give it. Sadly, I've been getting some network instability messages here while it is trying to rebuild the skateboard game. I've plugged a network cable directly into the computer in case there is a potential wireless issue or something of the sort, but unfortunately this is probably the last chance I will give it. While I wait to see if the network issue is resolved by just swapping over to Ethernet here with the skateboarding game improvement, in the meantime, I figure why not run another test. So we'll take a peek at the 3D printer simulation result here, just using OpenRouter. So here's our 3D printer simulation result. This is very, very unique. So I have a vacuum forming machine, and this is like a dead ringer for what my vacuum former looks like, but I'm happy to report that it's not so horrifically dark that we can't see anything. Everything here is definitely laid out in its own kind of quadrant in terms of the design from a user experience perspective, where we have our header, we have our control panel here, and then we have our actual printer. So with that, the next thing to do is to click the start button. Okay, you know what? It's simple, but it did it, and I'm okay with that. Now, sadly, I'm not able to move the camera around at all in this scene, so we can't really see if there's much nozzle or gantry movement, but we do see there are some defined layers here, and it does give us some printing statistics as well. Let's try our circle. Let me slow this down a bit more so we can try to see some layer by layer at least. It is possible I slowed it down too much there. Okay, good. And they're just kind of pancaking on top of one another, so a more simplistic take on this, but it's not really defined in the prompt how it should go about doing it, what level of realism, so acceptable. And sadly, the third try of our skateboard improvement test using OpenCode failed, so I'm going to just have to call that one. At least we did get an initial result with it, and for now we'll just focus on our OpenRouter UI testing. So here's our improved 3D printer result. Okay, that is definitely a significant improvement in the detail, and also now we do have the ability to actually move the camera. We see we have a spool there, we also have a screen, and a probably more realistic dimension printer. So now let's just see. It also redid the UI here to make it a bit more representative of the shape that we would see instead of just having the names. So that did work, although it's still kind of simplified. The nozzle's not really moving. Okay, actually, it was moving in a circular motion there. Let's try the pyramid and I'll slow it down. All right, overall, this was definitely an improvement over the original one in terms of the printer model, the ability to actually move the camera around the scene, and then it made the UI like a little more advanced. I'm trying in OpenCode one more time, but instead of improving the skateboarder result, I've given it a new prompt here, which is essentially just to create a first-person open-world 3D driving game with the ability to change to third-person as well that has PS1 style aesthetic graphics, so a simple open-world driving game with PS1 looking graphics. I have begun this in plan mode here, just telling it to read the instruct.txt, and then it's giving me some follow-up questions, which I will need to answer. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, so I'm not going to give it much in terms of the follow-up questions. I've told it I have absolutely no preferences beyond just the original prompt that it should read. All right, build it. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't get that network issue. All right, so it says this has done it and compiled it. Now, I will have inevitably shown that in some form of time-lapse because this thing just did a ton of troubleshooting. So let's actually see if we get something that works. That's quite frustrating. I'm just telling it the game opens to a black screen only. I'd intended to paste into it asking, how do I know if my display has that OpenGL 3.3 support, but I accidentally pasted in the original prompt instead. It has identified some issue there, and we'll continue to allow it to. Okay, definitely progress, and that is inevitably just the menu screen that's a little wonky, so hopefully when we get in there, press enter to start. Okay, I'm just going to do that and we'll... Oh, wow. So V is to toggle the camera view. Yeah, all right. I'm telling it this is crap. It doesn't show anything but basic shapes, which is true, and we'll see what it does. You're right. All right, it is insistent that this is working now, and we do see there's some... The big issue is just this is a no. That was a relatively difficult task, but you know, it was something I wanted to test in an agentic harness. Next up, I'm going to be trying the Flight Combat Simulator prompt. Now, this is similar to that initial result that I had shown in the introduction of this video, which is really what made me very interested in this model in the first place. There are some similarities, but the prompt I've just given it is more designed for combat scenarios instead of just like a static flight simulator like this, so it'll be interesting to see how they differ. So here's our Flight Combat Simulator game. Okay, very interesting. I really hope the plane models don't look like this. We'll work with whatever we get. Oh, no, this is... All right, so it does kind of work. The issue is that our plane model is not... Oh, I think that's us. Our health bar is actually going down as we get hit. Okay, so the camera's a bit wonky to use. Very wonky to use. The ammunition tracers are definitely quite visible. Let's try the P-51 Mustang. Okay. Ooh, okay. Let's see if we do lose all of our health. Mission failed. Return to hangar. Okay. This is a very, very abstract result. I was hoping for that sort of like unicorn aesthetic that I had received with that first random test that made me so excited here. I'm pasting in the entirety of that initial plane game that I received with it that had the really cool texture, and I've just told it to reskin the entire thing to look like this to match the retro aviation aesthetic from your reference. Okay, and we'll see how well it does in transposing that graphical style onto the combat simulator result we did just receive. Following this, I'm very excited to try a ship combat simulator game with this. basically I'm interested to see how it does with the water effects. So here's the attempt to morph the initial flight game result that I... Oh, okay. Oh, that's the ground plane, I think. Okay, there's some clipping issue. Wait a second. I think that's just our plane model, because when I hit the camera change, we actually get a significantly better result. Okay, so the lime greenness is just the actual model for our plane, so that is what is attributed to that. I will say it did a good job of putting the enemies into this good-looking map here, and we can see the 3 enemies are still down now there. Now the problem is our plane doesn't actually really move forward at all. It's just statically like drifting off, but it did a good job in implementing the map definitely as well, and just interesting but probably kind of difficult result. Next up, I'm giving it the ship combat simulator game because I'm very interested to see where it takes this visually. So here is our ship combat simulator result. Okay, pretty good. Well, okay, what I mean is it opens and everything is here and it did work without an error. We do see individual cannons. The ships are kind of spinning pretty aggressively, and sadly I'm not really able to move forward. Hey, we have some low poly like particle effects there in the water, which are kind of neat. And if we shoot, we do see individual cannons cannonballs coming out of each of these cannons, as well as splash effects into the water. We do have a timer for reloading, as well as some ship-specific metrics there. Now, the big issue that I notice here is the ships are either not moving at all or just significantly slower than what would make this kind of playable. And I think that is the case. So we actually do have some forward movement here. It's just a bit too slow. And I do like how it has where the blue ship and the enemy is a red ship there in terms of the flags that are being flown. So that's all right. Attention to detail. All right, this could benefit from a second chance. I'm just telling it to make it look much better. I know it can. You're absolutely right. Let me completely overhaul this with modern professional grade graphics and gameplay. So here's our improved ship game, Naval Combat, okay? And wow. Okay, so this is definitely improved. That is quite a recoil effect of the ship. Now, we have a mini map in the bottom right where I do generally put my head, and sadly the ship seems stuck in that it's not really able to move, and we can see there's some issues with the lighting and things like that, but this is definitely a pretty significant change over the previous one. It just seems that the actual gameplay doesn't necessarily work, but the clouds are moving there. Interesting, not necessarily a great... This is really quite an interesting initial lighting effect. So overall, it kind of got worse, but we can see between the two, it definitely had points where it significantly improved this. And in a harness, it would definitely have a bit more freedom to properly fix these things. I'd like to try something audio related, so now we're going to be giving it the drum kit simulation test, and this is the version where it also needs to implement 4 selectable drum tracks that will autoplay in different styles. So here is our drum kit simulation test. Usually it should have loaded by now, I hate to say. Oh, okay. Maybe I'll give it more time. I'm going to eat my words on that one. All right, we have it now loaded in. Let's just first initially test to make sure that the sound does work. Oh, I have to click start audio. Okay, that's on me. Okay, so the space for the kick drum is not working. Interesting effects too on the drums, not bad at all. Really the big issue right here is that the kick drum doesn't work, which is kind of a letdown as that is a fairly important drum. We'll try to work around it. Let's try our autoplay. Okay, so the kick drum works there, which is weird. That one's better, actually. That was better than the rock beat. Let's try funk. Can I play along to, like, oh yeah. I don't know what time signature this thing is working in, but I'm not necessarily familiar with it. All right, this is... Here we go. This was quite an alright result. The drum kit itself actually doesn't look bad. Really, the only huge knock here is that the bass drum or the kick drum is oriented the wrong way. The rest of these are actually quite alright, and they did have nice effects on them. So now for the final test, I'm giving it a front-end prompt here that I actually found in the Mimo V2 announcement post. I was looking for something that would be like a proper and decent front-end design test, so I just borrowed that from the announcement post there, and we'll see how well it compiles this 1990s print magazine aesthetic HTML site. And here's our retro 1990s magazine style front end. Okay, you know what? This is actually pretty well done, I think. Now, I don't know because this is a prompt I just borrowed from the Mimo V2 announcement post, but I'm going to say the hover effects and the actual stylistic elements here seem quite all right to me. The last print magazine in this issue, and we have a nice kind of center review, iMac G3 Design Revolution. Beautiful. I have one right over there. I'm staring at it as I speak to you. Additionally to that, okay, not bad. We have some specific information here in the footer, as well as the magazine lane, New York, New York. That's cool to see, and I do like this font that was chosen up here as well. And just for fun, I told it to keep the magazine aesthetic, but change it for the Sven restaurant, which is the most expensive restaurant. Okay, it didn't necessarily keep the full-on magazine aesthetic. It kind of just kept the color palette from that. But I suppose that's okay. So this was a bit simpler than what I'd hoped to see, considering I did it within the same chat window as this, but said keep the aesthetic and change it for the Sven restaurant, which is very expensive. Now, for the final thing that I wanted to do, because I was a little disappointed when we tried that driving game that was supposed to be a PS1 style open world driving game in OpenCode, and unfortunately we just couldn't get it working. I ended up going into Claude Code and having Opus 4.6 take a stab at it, and I asked it specifically like what exactly is causing these issues. It said the root cause, the shader class violates the rule of 5, and we see a bunch of different specific like reasons for why and what they cause and things of the sort. So I basically told it, okay, can you just fix that so we can actually play it? And now as the last thing, we're going to try once again to open the retro PS1 style game with the help of Claude Code to actually be able to play it, hopefully. Okay. That's actually like potentially kind of neat. Okay, not as much. I will say the procedural buildings are actually pretty cool in terms of how they would be in a city in real life. I mean, they're not just all the same. This definitely has more potential than we initially saw, and to the point the steering wheel in the cabin actually seems to be somewhat moving when we turn, so that's cool to see as well. And we do have the view. So the steering wheel's turning the wrong way, but we do actually have the view toggles as well. And again, keep in mind, this is with Claude having to have fixed the initial broken result that we had received. But here's a summary of the 4 fixes that I'll leave on screen as I speak, in case anyone is interested in reading through these. So really, that's going to conclude our first look and test of Cat Coder Pro V2. We had some pretty simple browser OSs, I suppose I would say. I wasn't really blown away by these, but, you know, they worked, they were clean. Though our 3D printer at a second try was significantly improved, although more basic, and the Sky Combat game as well. Overall, I guess the culmination of my experience with this is it's alright. I don't know that I'm super blown away. I don't think I could justifiably put insane in this title, which I would very much like to do, but in this one I can in good faith do that. The drum kit simulation was actually pretty good. I liked the effects on them. The autoplay had some interesting timing when it seemingly tried to loop over after the first measure, or whatever you want to call it. Some of the front-end capabilities, especially with this magazine website prompt, actually do seem quite alright. And I will say, really something, I think the thing that stuck out the most to me here, unfortunately we weren't able to really get the second iteration on it because I was having those weird network issues, but the skate game was, like, this was good. especially for a first try, no issues. And this was again used in OpenCode. So I don't know 100% what to say about this model, but I did want to test it because some folks had asked, and it was definitely a worthwhile test. Additionally to that, of course, how could I not show the first thing that got me kind of warmed up in seeing this, which was this very, very weird result that I had received here that was not suspiciously, it was just so odd and unique. I've not seen really like a ground map like this in any of the tests I've done with the flight combat sim, so it seemed to have its own unique style, I guess could be said. Even being able to toggle the landing gears and things of the sort was just very interesting. So I wanted to test this, and I'm glad I did. That is going to conclude our first look and test, of course, of Cat Coder Pro V2. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.